Who are you? Where are you from? Tell us about yourself.
I'm originally from Illinois, a small farming community out there about an hour to the west of Chicago. And right after high school, I went to the United States Air Force Academy out in Colorado Springs. Did my 4 years there, and then went to medical school at the Uniformed Services University, which is the military medical school out in Bethesda, Maryland. So I did my 4 years of medical school, graduated, went straight into my emergency medicine residency, which was at Dayton, Ohio. It was a joint program between Wright State University and the U.S. Air Force at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base out there, and I did my training out there. It was a unique program. It's a military program. It was a civilian program, but they allowed 5 or 6 military members to train out there each year, and did my training out there. Was still active duty during that whole time, and then my first station was down at Eglin Air Force Base on the Panhandle of Florida, near Fort Walton Beach and Destin there in Florida. And so actually was fortunate in that I was able to stay in that area for 11 years, went back and forth between Eglin Air Force Base and Hurlburt Air Force Base, which was just a little bit to the west of Eglin, and got deployed a few times while I was out there. Got to spend a little bit of time working with the special ops teams out there at Hurlburt, which is headquarters for Air Force Special Operations Command, which was very unique experience and very beneficial. And then in 2011, got transferred to San Antonio.
Okay.
And so I've been in Texas and San Antonio since then, and it looks like we're gonna be here to stay. So I retired from the military in 2018. At that time, I was the chief of the ER at BAMC, and so retired in 2018 and joined with Premier, and been happily working here since then.
What made you want to become a doctor?
I think just being able to help people, I guess, was the bottom line. I initially, when I went to college, I was thinking I had actually intended to major in aeronautical engineering, because that was where I'd always been. I guess math had always been my strongest subject, and been pushed into the engineering field by my family members. My sister was an engineering major at the time, and felt like that would be a good career choice. So my plan was to go to the Air Force Academy, become a pilot, do my aeronautical engineering major, and then probably just become a pilot long term. But then when I got out there, took a couple of these more advanced math classes, and just was not enjoying it at all. It was just not me, and it was very just working with paper and pencil and numbers, and it was just very impersonal and seemed very cold. And I thought back to all my biology classes in high school and my science classes, and where I really had my most enjoyment was during those classes. And so I thought, why don't I maybe take a different approach here, and really started thinking about medicine. And at the Air Force Academy, it's not really a medical preparation school. That's not their emphasis, of course. Their emphasis is to create military officers, and specifically Air Force officers with emphasis on flying. And they don't have a pre-medical major there. It was a pre-med track. And so I joined that pre-med track and really enjoyed my classes, and was fortunate enough to be accepted into medical school, and just never regretted it. So,
do you still fly, or do you fly at all?
I used to have my private pilot's license when I was in high school, and then, of course, did all the flight training classes. I actually had orders for pilot training when I left the Air Force Academy. I'd been accepted into the Joint Euro-NATO fighter training program at Shepherd at the time, and I had my orders for pilot training in one hand. I had my acceptance to medical school in the other hand. I had to make a decision there, and it's a big fork in the road. And really, I boiled down to was I spoke with my father, who was a dentist, who also was a pilot in his spare time. And what he said to me was he had a similar decision when he chose to go to dental school. And he always thought of flying as a hobby for him, as something he did for fun. And he started thinking, like, if what I do for fun becomes my career, what am I going to do for fun? I can't really practice dentistry for fun. So he decided to go to dental school and continue to fly on his own. And so what I figured at the time was I could go to medical school and then maybe become a flight surgeon or something along those lines. And I was setting up my rotations in medical school, third and fourth year, to get a little bit of experience in emergency medicine. I knew I wanted to do emergency medicine, but I was thinking also along the lines of a flight doc. And my advisor at the time said, if you want to get your residency done, do that first. You can always go back and do the flight surgeon thing later on. And so I got myself lined up, got into my residency, and very fortunate to get in my residency program that I did at the time, because it was not as many opportunities back then as there were. and then never got a chance to go back to flight medicine school and do the flight doc thing, but I guess it just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah.
Driving to work at Eglin Air Force Base and watching the fighter pilots flying around doing their formations and do takeoffs and landings, and I figured they were probably looking down at me thinking they were probably jealous of me work going into my shift in the ER most likely. So
Is there something that you wish you would have known about being a doctor before you made that choice that you know now?
well, I think you realize going in that it's going to be a pretty big commitment, but I don't think you really are ever prepared for how much of a commitment it really is, and really the toll that it takes on your family. And especially in the military, there's a lot of added responsibilities and things that will take you away from your time with your family, and it does take a pretty big toll on the family. And I remember during medical school, one of our professors had mentioned that medicine should never be higher than 3 or 4 on your list of priorities. And I think it's probably a good rule to live by. And I can't say that I've necessarily adhered to that throughout my career, but that's probably the best advice I could give somebody, is just make sure that you're balancing things: personal life, your family life, your spiritual life, and all those things need to not take a back seat. You're at your busiest.
So we've got warmer weather, obviously got some crazy storms coming here, but
Yeah.
floating the river in San Marcos is coming. It's coming.
Yeah.
What's some ideas or some ways that you can maybe help guide people to enjoy their time floating the river and not coming to see you at premiere?
Sure, I could say don't go to the river, but that's not going to happen. Obviously, you're much safer if you just stay home, but we've done that for the past year, and I think people are tired of that approach. So I would say if you're going to do it, make sure that you're just doing it safely. Make sure that you're not getting too crazy with the alcohol. If you are drinking, make sure there's at least one responsible person there who can keep an eye on things and make sure people aren't getting into trouble. Watch where you step, because there are a lot of sharp objects in there, especially when you're in deep water or murky water. I always recommend wearing some type of a foot covering, even if you're in the water. And we see a lot of people stepping on glass or little rocks or something underneath there that can cut your foot open pretty good. And those are very prone to getting infected as well. And yeah, just watch where you step, watch where you drink, watch where you're going, wear sunscreen, of course, and just be smart about it.
Yeah, that's good. What's some good water safety tips the parents can have with their kids, especially maybe young children?
I guess the thing is, obviously, I think it goes without saying, but you can't say it enough, is keep an eye on your kids.
Yeah.
My experience with this was when my boys were young. My older boy had a little pool party for his baseball team, and I brought our other son along with, who was probably 5-6 years old at the time. Maybe knew a little bit how to swim, but not really. And he was on a little inflatable raft in the pool. And I took my eyes off him, I swear, for just a couple seconds. And when I looked back, he was off the raft. And I saw him just manage to flail and get himself back onto the raft somehow, miraculously, because I would have been jumping in the water to try to grab him. But what struck me about it most was how quiet it was. And I think as parents, you get the impression that when your kids are in trouble, you're going to hear something. They're going to be yelling. There could be somebody else yelling. This was a pool full of other children. My son slipped under the water, and it was completely quiet. Even the people around him didn't even realize it until he had been under for at least a few seconds. And it's really important to have somebody keeping an eye on your kids the whole time. I would recommend that if you're having some type of a pool party or going to a pool party, make sure there's a lifeguard there or one responsible person who's going to keep an eye on things and make sure that nobody slips under unnoticed.
Yeah, that's good advice. You have probably had to deal with lack of sleep most of your career, working in the ER, being in the military, back and forth on night shifts, overnight shifts. How do you work on your own sleep rhythms with such a crazy schedule? And obviously there's other people in medicine that have that and other professions. What's some recommendations for helping get your sleep rhythms on track? Or are there?
My advice on lack of sleep is just to get more sleep. I think the literature backs that up. There's no other substitute for sleeping other than getting the right amount of sleep. And I find that as I maybe get a little bit further on in years, I need to pay closer attention to that, because when I was younger, I was more of the mindset of I'll sleep when I'm dead. There's that attitude, I think, throughout medicine, is sleep is for the weak, and you just need to press on, drink some caffeine and that kind of thing. Caffeine is great, but caffeine is a crutch, and it will not compensate for a lack of sleep. And so really, I think the important thing is getting sleep when you can, even if it's just a short cat nap here and there. And there's multiple studies to show that, both in the military and the civilian side, that getting sleep when you can is really the most beneficial thing for you.
Oh, good. So you just got named the director of ceremonies for Texas State. You have a graduation speech coming up. What would you tell anyone graduating that's going to just spur them on after college?
I always feel like I like to give advice. I don't know how much people actually listen to it. I know a lot of times people get advice that don't really need it, or don't necessarily listen to it. But I would say, going back to what I had mentioned before during medical school, is just keeping your priorities straight. Keep that list of what's important to you, those lists of 4 or 5 things. And personally, for me, I don't think your career should ever be greater than number 3 or 4 on the list of your priorities. There's other things that you need to be addressing, making sure you keep that work-life balance. It becomes more and more important, I think, now through the pandemic and the other things we've been facing here recently. We're finding out that how important it really is to find other ways to keep yourself centered and take care of those around you, including yourself. That's oftentimes what gets lost when you get busy, is taking that time to take care of yourself.
You enjoy some outdoors, maybe a little ranch life. Do you like driving a tractor?
So I don't have a tractor yet. I'm relatively new to the ranch world, but I've spent more time driving a chainsaw so far. So I've been getting a lot of use out of my chainsaw. I just bought a new one a few months ago, and I've been through several chains already. I'm like the terror of the cedars on my property right now. But there is definitely a therapeutic quality to going out and spend a little time with my chainsaw on the property. So.
That's good. When you're on the property, do you like sunrises or sunsets better?
Oh, definitely sunsets. Yeah,
That's
sunsets definitely. It's just a better time of day. Things are winding down. You can relax a little bit. You're not having to get ready for another work shift or dealing with the other problems that occurred during the day. That's all behind you, and everything else can wait till tomorrow. Plus, it's much easier to enjoy a beverage, an adult beverage at sunset rather than sunrise. I mean, you can have an adult beverage at sunrise, but people might talk about you a little bit.
What's the major difference, or is there a difference of being a physician in the military versus civilian life?
Yeah, I think that the main difference is, as I alluded to earlier, is all the additional responsibilities that you have as a military member. It's not just wearing a uniform, it's really a way of life. And it's really a full-time commitment that I don't think anyone can really understand what it's like to be deployed for 6 months or longer away from your family and to some really bad areas that really you're putting your life in danger. But at the same time, it's a very rewarding experience. Looking back, it's easy to say, yeah, it was definitely worthwhile. There were times where I felt it was not worthwhile, and I would have probably, quit if I could have. But it's a whole different way of life.
I bet.
Much
Dr.
nicer
Antonacci,
being on this side of